leading cause of fires? To prevent cooking fires, remember these 3 rules. Keep anything that can burn 3 feet away from the stove. Do not leave the kitchen when you are cooking. Stay and look when you cook. If you have a fire on your stove, cover the fire with the lid or a baking sheet. Then turn the stove off and call 911. Remember that cooking is the leading cause of fires, so do your part to prevent fires in the kitchen. See you next time. Hello, everybody. This is Bernie Bear from the St. Paul Fire Department. I want to remind you about something very important: working smoke alarms. You need to have smoke alarms on every level of your home, inside each sleeping area, and outside each sleeping area. If your smoke alarm has a battery, you need to replace the battery every year. Your smoke alarms need to be replaced every 10 years. Smoke alarms protect the ones you love. Make sure they are working today. If you need to replace your smoke alarms or need additional smoke alarms, please call 651-279-5976. We can help. See you next time. Did you know that smoking is the leading cause of fatal fires? If you smoke, you need to smoke outside and away from any buildings. Make sure you extinguish your smoking materials in a metal or glass container filled partway with sand or water. Never smoke in bed or while tired. Make sure you keep lighters and matches picked up and away from children. Make sure you have working smoke alarms in your home and test them monthly. If you need to replace or get additional smoke alarms, please call 651-228-6273. We can help. See you next time.
Hey, Alan, good morning. Good morning, Commissioner McDonough.
Good morning.
Just doing an audio check on my side.
Can you hear me okay, Maggie?
I can, Alan.
Morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Jim, before we get started, I was thinking we would have the county go first. Would you like to kick off the outside in piece?
So, thanks, Amy. Yeah, we're ready to go first. We're going to have Maggie kick us off. I'm going to finish it up, all right? I'll end it before, then we'll have some time for questions if that works for you.
Yep, that's great. I just want to, this is like our little dress rehearsal. Okay, so Maggie, not Margaret, Maggie will go first.
Sorry, yes.
And that's all right. And you say your name, Drian?
Drian, yes.
Drian. Okay, great. And hi, Keith. How are you?
I'm well. Good morning.
Good to see you again. I know we have a lot of ground to cover and quickly call us to order. So the St. Paul City Council Organizational Committee and Policy Committee comes to order. Today we have our what is intended to be a quarterly check-in on our unhoused community and efforts with Outside In Ramsey County and with what was once called Familiar Faces and some of our rapid response work. Just I think especially as we're heading into our 2022 budget conversations, really important to have a sense of, after an incredibly challenging and unusual year, where we are kind of heading into the fall. I think that helps us as policymakers, and then also I often think that the council meetings, and I'm sure this is true with the commission meetings as well, as it's a time to acknowledge the work that's been done and to celebrate the successes that we've had, because it has not been easy. And it's always in the work that we do, a lot of times we just keep working towards the next problem and never take a pause to recognize the work that's been done and accomplished. So I think that we can do both of those things here today. Our intention is to start out with Ramsey County. We have Maggie Drian here that will be kicking things off, and other presenters as well. We're pleased to have Commissioner Jim McDonough join us. If we were in council chambers, it would feel a little bit different and more, majestic, but here we are in Zoom. But it's wonderful to have you in our meetings. It's not often that we have county commissioners join us, so it's great to have you here today. And then we have quite a lineup of city staff and county staff here to support the questions in conversation. So we do have till 11:30. We can push out till 11:45 if need be, but our plan is till 11:30. I know that with the county starting off, my job, of course, is the one that forces us to close up one section and move on to the next one and keep us on track. So sorry if I accidentally offend anybody in the process of doing that. So with that, I will turn things over to Maggie Drian from Ramsey County, and maybe you can introduce your crew or let people introduce themselves as they present. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much to the St. Paul City Council for allowing us the opportunity to share with you today some of the important work that's going on in the Heading Home Ramsey space. So just some language alignment for all of you, and then I'll introduce the team. You previously would have heard of Outside In. You may have heard of Heading Home Ramsey, our continuum of care, and these were two dueling groups that both were champions of the work here. And really what we've done over the last year is brought together that framework to relaunch the Heading Home Ramsey continuum of care, which is what we're here to share with you a little bit about today. I'll start with introducing our team. So from our governing board, we have Chair of the Governing Board, Commissioner McDonough, and we have our Vice Chair, which is Deputy Mayor Jamie Tincher. From our steering committee, we have Chair Keith Lattimore and Vice Chair Alan Ostergaard. And then on the staff lead agency support side, which is Ramsey County, that is the backbone agency for this. My name is Maggie Drian. I'm a planning manager for our economic growth and community investment service team with Ramsey County. We also have Lonnie Adalin, who is our COC coordinator. And then we have Mary Kay Bailey and Ellen Waters, who are our consultants that support this work. So we're very excited for the opportunity to share with you some of the work that we've been doing the last, well, year for some of us, probably longer for others. But I've just pulled up my screen. Hopefully you can all see that. Perfect. Again, thank you for the chance to share with you. Our goal today is to give you a broad framework, as I mentioned, of the relaunch of the Heading Home Ramsey Continuum of Care, and then share with you a little bit about the work that is currently underway by the HHR COC at this point, so that you have a good understanding of kind of the body of work that moves in that space. So to give you a little perspective on what COCs are responsible for, ultimately they're here to promote a community-wide commitment to the goal of ending homelessness, so coordinating across the community that they represent. They are here to provide funding for efforts and around rapidly rehousing individuals and families. They're here to ensure that they promote access and effective use of mainstream programs. And then obviously to optimize self-sufficiency among individuals and families experiencing homelessness. So that's the whole frame of elements that they're responsible for. And in the past, as I mentioned, there were two bodies at work, and we had a number of challenges that were occurring for a variety of reasons. So we had siloed programs and systems. I think we're all aware of that. And when they're siloed, that leads to persistent gaps within the programming. We also had a lack of consistent and high-level leadership or focus. So we had two different groups with two different bodies of folks moving two different items. And so the efforts with the relaunch were to coordinate that. And then a main consequence of all of that was that we were actually missing opportunities to get additional funding from HUD, which ultimately funds a lot of the COC initiatives that you would be familiar with or that you'll hear about today. So a goal for our redesign was we knew that we had to change that, and we undertook a process to bring those two groups together and relaunch in a new forum where there would be clear expectations, strong leadership, and adequate resources. So what does our COC look like today? We relaunched that in winter of 2021. And the vision of this work is ultimately that we will work together to create a community where homelessness is rare, brief, and non-recurring, where we eliminate racial disparities and everyone is housed. Our mission to prevent and end homelessness by delivering effective, people-centered, integrated responses that are racially equitable and driven by community voice, advocacy, and learning. This is the work that really embodies what the continuum of care is advancing. And hopefully, as you see more about what we're doing here, you'll see that this is being really lived into with the new launch. A little about structure, and then we'll get into the more fun components, which the rest of the team can take you through. But as we restructured this, we now have a variety of different groups that meet. Up here at the top, you'll see that we've got our full continuum of care, our full membership meeting, which occurs twice a year and is open to any interested folks within the Ramsey County space or partners to the Ramsey County homeless efforts. And this is the group that really ultimately will designate who's responsible, who's serving on our governing board and steering committees. An important component of that was ensuring that we had provider forums and consumer forums where we could really hear from the folks impacted by the work and the folks doing the work to ensure that the work was in service of the community that we intend to serve. Underneath that, we have a governing board, which meets quarterly, and these are really high-level senior officials within organizations that come together quarterly to advance the work of the steering committee. The steering committee meets monthly or as needed, and they are the operational leaders, a bit closer to the work, who can really help to advance and get work done. Ultimately, the work of the steering committee will move up through the governing board who adopts, and then we work to fully implement those initiatives. You'll hear quite a bit today about standing committees or working groups that we have, and this is the mechanism by which we actually move work during the interim times where meetings are happening. So you'll see that there are groups that are excited about a specific topic. They choose to take that one on and drive that, and then come back to the steering committee to share the work that's been going on. At a quick glance, here is our governing board members, and I believe we provided these slides to you in advance, so I don't have to read every name for you, but you can see that on our governing board, we are lucky to have individuals such as Commissioner McDonough and Deputy Mayor Tincher, but we also have strong leaders from some of our partner organizations, such as Clues and Ujamaa Place at this table. So it really is a collaborative approach that we're seeking to advance. You'll see a same vision here with our steering committee members. Again, we have system operators such as government, such as Keith Lattimore, and we also have those on-the-ground providers such as our Vice Chair, Alan Ostergaard. So we have a variety of different voices in that space to ensure, again, this is a community-driven, collaborative approach as we move through this work. With that, I will hand it off to Vice Chair Alan to take us through the next part.
Awesome. Thanks, Maggie. Hi, everybody. Alan Ostergaard. I am a senior outreach practitioner with Radius Health, and I serve as the vice chair, like Maggie said. And then previously, I was one of the 2 funded street outreach workers with the Outside In Initiative. So just a little context there. So first, I just want to go over our collective impact as a model for which we try to create our new collaborative and effective COC. So this is always a work in progress, but here we are right now. Number 1, coming to a common agenda. Really, we're trying to develop our common understanding of the problem, and then we're trying to create a shared vision for the change that we're trying to create. Number 2, our shared measurement, really collecting data and measuring the results, and then focusing on the performance management and then shared accountability. I think that was something that was always hard because, you know, collective or a lot of different folks were looking at a lot of different things as benchmarks, and really trying to get on the same page has really been really important these first few months of the new COC. Mutually reinforcing activities. So there are differentiated approaches, then coordination through our joint plan of action. So really, once we all kind of knew where we're trying to go, it's okay that we're all doing different things as long as we're going in the right direction. Number 4, continuous communication. Consistent and open communication. It's really amazing what we can do when we have good working relationships. There's a lot of amazing faces on this call even that I have a lot of interaction with, and it's really helps move the ball forward for those that we're trying to serve. And then focus on building trust. If we don't trust our other partners at the table, that was always kind of an issue of them and us. So, and then the backbone support, separate organizations with staff, and then resources and skills to convene and coordinate participating organizations. And again, like Maggie mentioned, Ramsey County is our backbone agency for the new COC. There's MOUs in place, and that was a long process that we came to get that into place. So I'm really excited that that's where we're at right now. So why collective impact works? So this is the idea that if we all work together on the same issue in the same direction, we're able to make considerable changes and improvements working on the same topic, but not in silos, leads to disorganized and not always productive impacts in the community interest. So again, to the other slide about common agenda, shared measurement, as long as we're all going to the same place and we're not trying to put out different fires, we're able to really do a lot of good things. And so this just kind of illustrates that point. All right, and then our strategic framework values. So I'm just going to kind of go over them, but as part of our relaunch, we set about to identify the desirable, describe the values of our Heading Home Ramsey continuum of care. So number 1, racial equity, client-centered, everything needs to be client-centered, trauma-informed, we are housing first, a community level approach, trying to be data informed, and really an effort to be bold and innovative. We really are trying to do all of these things, and there was a long process by which we narrowed down these values to these ones, but this is where we're at for the beginning of our new continuum in our relaunch. All right, and then our strategic framework impact areas. So this is for the first 2 years of our continuum of care, our vision for our community. So ensuring that homelessness is brief, expanding coordinated and equitable prevention strategies to ensure that homelessness is rare, increased and accessible health and support services, increasing supply and diversity of housing available, and then families, individuals, youth, and marginalized and underserved communities achieve economic self-sufficiency and thrive. And like I said, a working group of many stakeholders developed this strategic framework for the new, and this is hopefully going to be where we're at in a year and a half here. And then finally, our strategic framework blocks. So we did identify some of the things that were issues in the previous iterations of the continuum, and so these were some things that we're really trying to keep in the forefront to make sure they don't continue to be an issue. Systemic racism, eligibility criteria, housing supply limitations, different funding issues, coordinated entry, the public will and the NIMBYism, again, the siloing, and then prevention. With that, I'm going to hand it over to our COC chair, Keith Latimer.
All right, good morning and thanks for having us this morning. Keith Lattimore, Ramsey County. I'm the Director of Housing Stability. That's the newly formed department within the county, and also doubling as the chair of the steering committee of our continuum of care. So good morning and thank you. So what work is underway from our continuum of care? So as Maggie mentioned, we wanted to relaunch the COC, and it took place last winter. And since then, we've been busy. We want to share the current work as it's underway, and our partners, our organizations. And it's important to realize that some of this work is under the COC umbrella, and some is being led by outside partners, but with COC representation at the table. Not all work to serve our Ramsey County homeless population to occur at the COC table, but our hope is that all the work advances our community in a way collectively that'll collectively impact the way that we are addressing people experiencing homelessness. You'll see that in our Ramsey County COC redesign, we have three main areas. And in those strategic directions, the first one is we wanted to strengthen holistic homelessness response system. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slides ahead. The second one, we wanted to engage, we want to be engaging in collective coordination for impact. And then finally, our third one is that we wanted to drastically increase shelter and housing supply. And we'll talk about the different groups under there that's doing that work. So as we move into the first one, our strengthening holistic homelessness response system. First, we wanted to look at the design and prioritize seamless, equitable, and client-centered service. We wanted to kind of make a shift in that because, oftentimes government, we do things for people and not always have them at the table. So we wanted to make sure it was client-centered. So we focused really on what the clients needed, and we collectively use that impact from our providers, those who had the years of service and who had an understanding and had a really diverse approach to the work. Some of the things that, that is in this, we wanted to develop a dashboard to regularly monitor with continuum of care. Let me go back there, one slide. Back a slide, Maggie. And then just, we also wanted to determine what client data can be legally shared across agencies to better serve clients. So these are some of the things that we were looking at in our first year priorities. We also wanted to improve access to services, and we wanted to also focus on prevention. Next slide, please. And so here's some of the work that is happening under that first, one of those first strategic priorities. And so we wanted to develop that dashboard. And we have a group of members, and as you can see, if you look at our member column, you'll see a diverse group of individuals that is working collectively to address some of the issues and bring all of those diverse ideas to the table. We also wanted to establish that dynamic tool to provide information about resources to providers, people seeking assistance, and just the general public. One of the things that we look at there, we also wanted to be a continuum of care that is welcoming to outside and build our collaborative with the community as well. And that's one of the things that we wanted to focus on. So we had people at the table. We also want to connect workforce services to people experiencing homelessness. Again, kind of taken away from that siloed approach. We're happy to have our workforce solutions director. That's a part of our governing board at the table. So there's a heavy investment in making sure that we get the information out there and increase folks and get them, the jobs and things that they need to be sustainable. We wanted to map prevention strategies across the COC, study strategies and services that support tenant stabilization, advocacy, continued housing success. And we also wanted to target discharges to homelessness from any institution or from state custody. Now, some of these are actually in full swing. Others are a little slow to start because we do have a lot of, things that we're doing. So that work is underway. Some is a little further along the line than where others are. Our second one is engaging the collective coordination for impact. And so with this, we look at strategic funding for priorities. And one of the main things that we recognize is that, we could do better. And we could do better to make sure that our HUD score, which is a score that determines really the funding that we receive here in Ramsey County. And so we wanted to make sure that we focus on priorities to make sure that our score comes in higher, because in the end, it basically, we could be leaving money on the table and having decreases in our funding as opposed to increases. So there's a focus there to make sure that we're doing our part so that our residents of Ramsey County are actually in a better position by the work that we do. And the COC is able to mobilize and take action on emerging priorities. So that's one of the things that, this group is working towards on our second priority. So if you look at some of the members again, you'll see that, various members, some are on more work groups than others, but it's a heavy investment of a diverse group of individuals coming together to work on priorities. And as you see here, the first priority, as I mentioned before, is to score higher on the HUD. That accounts to dollars. And so we want to do a good job of that. And that's really a heavy focus to make sure that we as Ramsey County and those who make up our continuum of care are working towards getting that and those fundings, opportunities for us so we can pass those along to those that are doing the work. We wanted to deploy rapid response teams to respond to emerging and acute situations as they arise, none more like the pandemic that we're going through now. And then, we also wanted to focus on racial equity, accountability project. I think that, when we look at our disparities for those who are experiencing homelessness, we believe that is a high priority. So we obviously have a group here to make sure that we focus on that, and that's the forefront of the work that we're looking to do. And then finally, we wanted to develop strategies targeted at specific populations, specifically culturally specific groups, modeled on success of that registry. And then third, our third priority is drastically increasing shelter and housing supply. I wanted to effectively and efficiently client movement through and out of the COC. So not just getting in, we wanted to make sure that there's pathways out. One of those pathways is that as we look at things that are, facing us, we want to make sure that after the pandemic, we recognize that there are landlords who would like some supports. And we wanted to make sure that we're not losing landlords or those who may be frustrated with systems or who haven't been utilized before to partner. And so we wanted to take a non-traditional approach in trying to find out how do we put a support system in to make sure that landlords have what they need and so they can be good partners in making sure that they are working towards addressing homelessness. We believe that we can make some strides with landlords now, specifically after those who may have, had a different take on the pandemic and the eviction moratoriums and how it's been effective. We've heard from some landlords who may be wanting to get out of the landlord business, and we want to keep them at the table. So we believe that that is a heavy investment of what we should be doing to bring those landlords to the table and work on some things that can support them in their work efforts. And we look at the first three priorities. We wanted to conduct an analysis of the shelter capacity, operations, and funding. We also have a group that's engaged in supporting existing and new property owners through new Ramsey County Housing Stability Department and other efforts. And again, increasing housing supply, cities and counties. I'll take a quick pause here just to talk about, we want to also approach landlords who, haven't traditionally been at the table. We have smaller landlords, some that are in communities that our homelessness population may want to stay in. So we wanted to make sure that, those landlords are at the table and we can utilize those who might be in the communities that may have cultural support systems already in place, those who may have religious services that are, in the same neighborhood, and those who may be working and have just family support for daycare and things of that nature that offers opportunities for individuals who are experiencing homelessness to stay in communities that they're most familiar with. Okay, next slide. Sorry, I got a yapper here, as you can see. But with that, I'll pass this on to our Commissioner McDonough.
Thanks, Keith. So a couple of the key points here I want to maybe focus on a little bit here but as we start wrapping up. But one of the key things that we committed when we did this relaunch, or whatever you want to call it, of the Heading Home Ramsey Continuum of Care, was to ensure that we were measuring success, not only for us as a governing board and organization to be able to adjust, whether it's policy or dollars, but also for the community to be able to have, I think the word trust was used a number of times here, to be able to trust that we are focusing in on results and we are trying to make that difference where we have an impact on the individuals who are homeless. And so we're working on the dashboard. That was one of the first things that we committed to. That data is important. And so I'm just going to walk us through this dashboard and some of the measurements that we're focusing in on that we're going to make available not only to the governing board, but we'll have it on our open data portal. So it's available for our partner organizations. So that's available for the community at large to utilize that data ever how they see, but also have that check-in to make sure that we're honoring our commitment to the community here with our mission. So, the first one we're really looking at is measuring how many people are experiencing homelessness in an emergency shelter or the street outreach programs. And that's really important for us. The encampment issue within the city or our region, actually, having a good understanding of who's out there and where they're at can really help us have an impact on moving people into safer places. How long are families and singles on the waiting list after they've been assessed for housing and coordinated entry? Long time complaint here about the coordinated entry system in general, but for us to be able to know every day how many people we've got on that waiting list, how long they've been on that list, with a goal of shrinking that list and making sure that wait is as small and minimal as possible. How many people in shelters are new to homelessness this year? How many have previously experienced homelessness? We know for the most part, a large part of the homeless population, it is brief, it's rare, it's a crisis, it's a moment in time for them. But we also know there is a substantial population in our community that are long-term homeless. And so the approaches need to be a little bit different. We need to know where they're at. We need to have that understanding of how many people really are truly, this is their first time, and can we intercept that, make that as brief as possible, and not reoccur ever again for that individual or family. How much of each type of housing is available across the continuum? And we just had a conversation yesterday at one of our workshops with the leadership of Keith and the Housing Stability Office, of really understanding this continuum. And I know a number of the city folks are on here, and they know this number. 15,000 is the identified gap of available housing units within our community. 15,000, and a majority of those are at the 30% affordability, right? And so often when we talk about 30% affordability, it's always, supportive housing with services. We're really starting as, we're listening to community and bringing people into the community. A lot of times they don't need anything more than that 30% affordability. They don't necessarily always need the supportive piece that goes along with that. We've got to figure that out, because the sustainability of that 30% affordability is the supportive services that go along with that. How do we sustain that 30% affordability without services where we can really probably reach a big part of the people in our community in a way that we haven't been able to do in the past? How many people are entering or leaving our housing projects? We got John Gautzman from St. Paul Public Housing. He was a part of, Outside In was mentioned, but Rush was actually before Outside In and the work we did with Rush. And John has been a part of this since day one, off to the side. And now with this refurbished continuum of care, John is at this table, and John is a part of the problem solving as we have conversations about this. And it's really important to have public housing at that table. We helped increase the income of people we have served. You know, Keith mentioned Ling Becker, our Workforce Solutions Director, is a part of the governing board. That's new. There's some really cool things happening because of this refurbish. And we've been able to, there's a lot of good things there before, and we've been able to bring the good things along and keep those people engaged and actually bring some new energy and excitement with this here. But having Ling at the table, really focusing in on the workforce piece, and her desire right now is to focus in on the youth piece. We know we've got a big issue with unaccompanied youth in our community and the impact it has on them long term. If we don't intercept that and break that cycle, they tend to be preyed on. And so Ling really wants to focus some of the workforce stuff within the homeless youth, the unaccompanied youth. How many people return to homelessness within 6 months of leaving the program? Big issue, right? We don't want this to be reoccurring. It's a part of our mission. We understand that there's going to be crises, there's going to be things that happen in individuals' lives. But our goal is not to have it reoccur. Our goal is not to just try to get somebody somewhere stabilized for a short period of time, but then we turn around and there they are again. And it becomes that revolving door. And we've been doing that. We understand that. Amy, I see you shaking your head. I mean, we all know people in the community, right? We know them. We know their names. Alan, you know, being out on the street every day, they know their names and really making sure. So that's why this dashboard is really important, because we'll have those numbers. It won't be anecdotal. It won't be Alan coming to us and saying, you know, I've seen, you know, Susie and John and Tom. I keep seeing them. We'll see that on this dashboard. It'll be available for us as a governing board. It'll be available for the steering committee, be available for our work groups that come together, and for our partner organizations, and I said for the community at large. So I'm really happy that this group has agreed to take this on right away. I don't think we can, you know, start anything with real chance of success without being able to measure what we're doing. And that was a big part of Rush and a big part of Outside In. That's one of the things that we've been able to bring this table. So Maggie, there you go. Final thoughts on the change. And I just wanted to maybe share a couple of things here. You know, if you get a moment and take a harder look at that governing board, we were very strategic in ensuring that we had decision makers, right? We had executive directors. We had people that could make decisions for their organizations. That was one of the strengths of Rush, and then the transition to Outside In. It's having people like John Gutzman or Joe Gothard or Pahua at the time, Ann Mulholland, and now Pahua from the St. Paul Foundation. People that could be participating in problem solving. They can get a handle on what's going on, but they can offer solutions from their organization, and they can do it with people that can go back to their organizations. The other importance of having those decision makers at the table is for those decision makers to be able to go back and institute change within their organizations, to take back the work that we're doing and aligning at the continuum of care, and to be so many times what's happening at Radius or what's happening at People Incorporated or Catholic Charities or Union Gospel or Clues or HAP or Ujamaa Place is really critical to our success. And not only is it when they come to the table to be able to do that, but it's when they go back to their tables, they go back to their organizations to bring that work back into their organizations. And that's one of the key strengths I think here is we brought those decision makers. You know, another piece that was really important here that we found out in lessons learned is, you know, there was a reason why Rush formed to the side, why Outside In evolved from that, because there wasn't necessarily, this isn't critical, right? It's evolution. It just happened, right? But there wasn't this sense that the continuum of care in that current form was nimble enough or bold enough to be able to take on some of these things. So the community was starting to form things off to the side, which was not helpful to us. We were in silos. We weren't necessarily working together, or there was overlap and redundancies that was inefficient for us to be working on. So as Outside In was kind of winding down, and I'll give you a really good example. I mean, when we did Rush, we brought, you know, Health Partners came to the table with money. Health East came to the table with money. St. Paul Foundation came to the table with money. Met Council came to the table. Public housing came to the table. Ramsey County came to the table. The city of St. Paul came to we all brought resources in, right, to help with this coordinated effort. And that was a strength that we hadn't necessarily seen before. And we didn't want to lose that, right? We think that's a strength. But for that to happen, the leaders need to be at the table. For that to happen, people have to have trust that this organization, this continuum of care, is going to be able to actually accomplish and move the needle as we look at our homeless population. I just briefly talk about it. I'll just real short, and then we'll Council President Bredmo will turn it back to you. I know Maggie's prepared to kind of spearhead some questions that people have, but the whole issue about HUD and us leaving money on the table. When I learned that, I was angry. I was angry. I mean, it had a lot of emotion ran through me, but anger. Why are we doing that? And then to see other continuum of cares in our region actually getting more money, getting rewarded because they're hitting the numbers. And sometimes the tail wags the dog, right? When it's got the money, and HUD's got the money, and if we're not meeting what HUD expects, we're going to lose out on those resources, and no longer can Ramsey County, the city of St. Paul, our area, lose out on those resources. So that's been one of the number one goals that we've aligned with the partner organizations, with the governing board, is not only do we position ourselves that we don't leave money on the table, but we position ourselves that we bring in more dollars when they're available. So with that, Council President, I do want to recognize Council Member Naker does sit on our governing board as a rep from the City Council. Jamie, Deputy Mayor Tincher is our vice chair. She's a part of our executive committee. We meet regularly with Keith and the leadership team from the committees. And then also there's a number of key St. Paul staff that are a part of either the governing board or our steering committees, and we appreciate them. They bring a lot of valuable experience here as we're working, whether it's a specific topic like you'll hear in a little while on the rapid response or familiar faces, or just positioning ourselves to do better within our community. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Council President Bredmo. Thank you for having us, and I know Maggie's prepared to kind of help spearhead any questions that your members may have of this presentation today.
Thank you. So I'm looking to see if anyone has a hand up, but I think I'll just start and say that this report it's heartening and it's hopeful to me. I remember participating in the Citizens League's Pathways to Prosperity project a few years, now probably about 15 years ago, and just feeling like our systems are set up to keep people poor and to keep people there wasn't a goal to getting people on a pathway to success, to wealth, to stability, and just looking at things holistically. And to be honest, and I don't mean this to sound unkind, but in the past, when I've thought of Ramsey County and systems, I thought I never would have used the words innovative or nimble or introspective and honest. I mean, I heard a lot of honesty here today and willing to address problems holistically. And that's what this presentation has been. And so it just really gives me a lot of hope for the folks that we're serving, our most vulnerable populations, to not only serve them well, but then get them on a path to self-sustainability where possible. And I don't feel like I have heard that before, and I love it. And the other thing, and I know that I think was very commonplace in the past, and it feels like this is changing as well, is when questions came up about who's serving who or what we're going to do about one thing to the next, we would point to somebody else. Well, that's the county. Well, that's this organization. Well, they're supposed to do this. And everybody would sort of point to somebody else. And the person who is looking for services can't chase those things around. And I don't think that it's a very satisfying answer, and it doesn't get results. And it looks like now we're pointing to ourselves in this group, the continuum of care, and expecting answers and results. And so it's a huge shift. It is a huge shift. And I just think that this is incredibly heartening, and I really appreciate this update. And I do intend to continue to get regular updates, because it sounds like, I think as Mr. Latimer said, some of the stuff is up and running, some of stuff is slower to get started, but we will in 3 months imagine where we'll be if this is the path we're headed off today after just such a short time of getting this up and running. So if you don't mind, we'll expect to just kind of continue this conversation because the problem isn't going away, although that is our goal, right? I see Ms. Yang has a hand up, so I will look to her.
Thanks, Council President. I'll also echo you and share that I also feel really hopeful too. So I want to say thanks to all of you for coming and sharing about this really, really amazing work that has been put together. I'm really hopeful about seeing us get more HUD dollars so that we can continue serving our families who are in need the most in our communities here. And I have a question. I know, like with that last slide and all the questions about how this work will be measured, can you all specify how will that data be collected? Is it a specific team that's going out doing that work, or is it basically anyone who is on the grounds doing this work?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that, Council Member Yang and Council President. We appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. I also want to recognize that we have Lonnie, who is our team expert in this area, but we do have a research evaluation team, and some of the supports that really stand up the COC enable them to be able to be our resources to help us dive into the data that's available on HMIS and that's out there from our different providers and partners. And so collaboratively, that group is responsible for helping us frame up the data that will go in there. We are looking to continuously improve that. So it's a first draft of a dashboard. Our hope would be that in the future, it's so easy. Anyone can jump in there who's not familiar with the topic, see it, and understand the state of homelessness in Ramsey County and where we're making progress or not. So it's certainly something we're continuing to work on. The dashboard's only as good as the data behind it, and that's something that we know that we're going to continue to work on as well. Our team continues to look at ways to improve the data quality that's put into the systems that we're able to leverage. But part of it is about getting all of our partners to use those different databases so that our quality of data really is high. We know that, again, that's an area that we don't have consistent or high quality use across all partners. And so that's something that team works on regularly to advance. And hopefully a few years from now, you'll see a much cleaner, a much higher quality data presentation than we have right now. But at this point, it's the best we've got. And we've certainly got resources that are here to help ensure we're pushing that forward with each step we take.
Fantastic. All right. I don't see hands up from other colleagues. I will ask, is your PowerPoint, I didn't see yet this morning, but is your PowerPoint attached to the Legistar system so that if someone was watching this, they could look at the PowerPoint that you made to us? Holly, anyone?
Council President Brenmo, council members, the PowerPoint is not attached to the agenda. I'll attach that in the next PowerPoint right now. So
okay, great. I just wanted to make sure. I know sometimes people get an opportunity to look afterwards, and when I was like jotting down notes, and I'm like, whatever, I can't keep up. But I know I'll take a look later. I think it's definitely worth having in there for folks to see. And even referring back to it. So thank you for that, Holly, as well. All right, well, we are, like I said, we will be inviting you back in. We know that this work is ongoing. Ms. Naker is not with us this morning, but I know that she reports back to us as well as part of our, we check in once a month about the commissions, boards, and committees that we sit on so that we all get somewhat of a heads up. So we hear a bit from her on this as well. But let's keep up this conversation, keep up this partnership. It's good work. And like I said, I never thought I would use those words, innovative and nimble and introspective with Ramsey County, but it happened today twice. So that's pretty cool. And we will shift then over to Deputy Mayor Tincher and the work of the city and how it intersects with what we heard here this morning. So thank you so much, Ramsey County. All of your presentation was wonderful and very informative. So thanks. And Deputy Mayor, I don't know, who is your PowerPoint person?
Holly is going to help us.
Okay, great.
And I have a number of our team members with me. I think in the interest of time, when they start their portion of the PowerPoint, we'll just have them introduce themselves at that point. And I can jump right in we'll try to save as much time as possible for discussion at the end. On slide 2, like communities across our nation, St. Paul continues to experience public health, public safety, and economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Amid the many interconnected challenges we continue to face, we remain committed to a comprehensive, coordinated, and data-driven approach to public safety. The framework shown on this slide was designed by Mayor Carter, and his administration is working now across multiple city departments and in partnership with Ramsey County, St. Paul Public Schools, nonprofit partners, and community groups to operationalize this model. We've expanded our public safety approach beyond simply responding to emergencies after they happen to making strategic investments toward reducing the number of emergencies we endure in the first place. And with the current federal funding landscape, this is an ideal time to advance targeted intervention efforts that will interrupt cycles of crime and violence. In St. Paul, we've been focused on expanding our current emergency response by adding to and coordinating with our police officers and EMTs with supports such as youth workers, social workers, public health professionals, housing counselors, grief counseling, youth jobs, and workforce training. On the next slide, we have several leaders from St. Paul who serve on the governing board and steering committee of the Heading Home Ramsey Continuum of Care. And from the work of the Community First Public Safety Commission, a diverse 48-member group who convened for 5 months and were tasked with re-envisioning emergency response in St. Paul, we now have a 400-page report and clear recommendations to advance. Our city work group leading the efforts to respond to the needs of our residents experiencing homelessness has benefited from both those efforts in solidifying our commitment to find long-term and permanent housing options for our residents experiencing homelessness, while we also focus on responding to the immediate needs of those sheltering on the street, in tents, caves, parks, and under bridges. And with that, I'll turn it over to, I believe, Director Cervantes.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good morning, everybody. Ricardo Cervantes, Director of the Department of Safety and Inspections, here with the City of St. Paul and one of the leading departments in some of this work. Next slide, please.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me. I'm having some struggling this morning. All right. Is that the right slide, Director Cervantes?
Director Cervantes, I think you're on mute.
All the wheels are falling off here.
Here we go. Yes, you're on the right slide. Thank you,
right,
Holly. Thanks so much. Yeah, so our response team in St. Paul has relied on incredible partners in this work, and we're committed to continuing strong collaboration and coordination with all of these partners and more. So you can see the members of each one of the different areas of partnership here. And I just want to point out the work groups that are currently in flight. We heard a little bit about Heading Home Ramsey and the wealth of information and experience folks bring to that. Within our city, we have our Unsheltered Work Group, which is made up primarily of our department heads as well as deputy directors in our regular ongoing management of our encampments, as well as planning and strategizing around how we can make improvements. And then lastly, our area action plan, of which we meet every 2 weeks to talk about how we can coordinate all of our services within the city and our partners outside the city, several agencies, to provide responses to some of the more unique challenges that we have in regards to serving our unsheltered homeless community and residents and businesses surrounding those areas. Next slide, please. This slide depicts the encampment work that has been we have been engaged with since 2019. We've managed a total of 757 unique encampment locations across the city. Understanding that many of these same locations become reoccupied, we actually estimate the number of engagements to be close to about 850. And using our approach to manage and ultimately close these encampments, because we believe firmly that the encampment or an encampment is not a safe place for anybody to live in Minnesota. And I want to point out that during this body of work, that we've had 0 incidents of force by our police department in doing our work around our encampments over the last several years. Next slide, please. This is our current situation. This slide depicts the current locations where individuals are currently sheltering outdoors. We have been tracking 17 encampments as of last week, with an estimated 28 occupants within that 17 encampments. Next slide, please. Our current statistics, as we've been tracking, this slide depicts the dramatic increase in the number of individuals that were sheltering outdoors after COVID hit. At the height of the crisis, we reached 380 individuals sheltering outdoors. And as I mentioned, as of last week, we had 28 individuals currently sheltering outdoors.
Director Cervantes, just a quick question. And you may be getting to this, but are Dorothy Day and Union Gospel Mission, et cetera, back at full capacity?
No.
Okay.
Council President Brenmoen, they're working towards that. Given the latest information, I have not been updated yet on the conversations about congregate living, but that's one of the main considerations.
Okay. I was just curious if there was a parallel between them maybe getting back to full capacity, as well as, in addition to the work that we're doing that accounts for that radical drop off in March of this year, but it sounds like they're not yet back at full capacity.
No, and I can speak to that real briefly.
Sure.
We have worked diligently from really October, November of last year in creating new shelter options with the county. Both with resources that the city had, one-time resources, and one-time resources that the county had, have been able to stand up multiple models of housing or shelter, for individuals that we've been able to move folks indoors. And we continue to maintain a capacity for individuals that are currently outdoors. So.
Okay. Yep, that makes perfect sense.
Yep. So the good news of the dozens and dozens of low barrier shelter referrals that we made to Ramsey County over this period, it's estimated that there's 65 individuals that have moved into a step-up housing. And so people are kind of moving through the system, and that is how it was designed. Next slide, please. So as you can imagine, the city has learned quite a bit in 2020 in our work managing the unsheltered homeless encampments during this global pandemic. We observed many instances where unsheltered individuals were living in incredibly unsafe conditions. And it really pains me to report out to you that during the last year, we had 5 individuals perish as a result of their living conditions. As a result, the city continues to remain steadfast in our belief that living in a tent in Minnesota is not and should not be a housing option for our unsheltered residents. Since the fall, the city began the process of closing encampments explicitly for safety concerns. We are doing so in the utmost humane fashion that we can, using human-centered approach, attempting to identify an individual and their unique needs of these occupants, coordinating our efforts with street outreach, providing low barrier shelter referrals, storage needs, and even transportation services when requested. In 2021, the city plans to maintain our encampment closure at the same pace that we've done over the last 9 months, doing all that we can to encourage occupants to take advantage of the available shelter that we've worked with our partners. And then lastly, for all the sites that we have previously closed, the city plans to maintain those sites as closed going forward. If they become occupied, we'll continue to provide the same services that we have for the other closures, and enhancing those, of course, with our rapid response team, and then following a 72-hour timeline for turnarounds. Next slide, please. Once the effect of the pandemic hit And due to the scale of the crisis, many in St. Paul leadership team, including the mayor, myself, deputy mayor, department directors, engaged directly with our residents experiencing homelessness to assist however we could. While this greatly helped address the immediate crisis, we also learned quite a bit about how to respond as a city. And we feel this work should be embedded in the roles and responsibilities for the city with our staff as well as our city. There's been three key areas of learning for us, and these may all be things that, of course, those who've worked in this area may have understood for quite a long time, but they're important for us as we continue to build out our response efforts. The key learnings have centered around law enforcement and perceptions for people experiencing homelessness. And we've learned to be very intentional about the law enforcement presence in this work. We've all but diminished their presence at the encampments and during closures. We need, when we need them for safety reasons, they're nearby and willing to assist in those areas. But they serve in a variety of other roles as providing good information in regards to the individuals that we're trying to serve. So it's information sharing as well as providing us any criminal information that might be helpful in us in working out solutions for individuals. Through surveys and discussions directly with people experiencing homelessness, we've heard fears from some people that when they are engaging with law enforcement, based on their previous experiences, we've observed numerous instances where our unsheltered residents will not necessarily engage when they see somebody with a badge. They oftentimes kind of shut down, walk away, disengage, and ultimately they'll remain unsheltered. Another key learning is that one size does not fit all. Some solutions just don't work for everybody. And so we need individual responses for those folks. And now fully appreciate the time and space required to build trust in order to uncover those issues and develop individualized solutions. And then thirdly, we have learned that timeliness is key. When a person is ready to engage and we are unable to provide the appropriate resources and act swiftly, they often disengage and then they remain outside. And so timeliness is paramount. With that, I'll turn it over to Travis Bistadu.
Thank you, Director. Good morning, Council President Brenmo and Council members. My name is Travis Bistadu. I'm one of the Deputy Directors here at DSI and have been heavily involved in the encampment work over the past couple of years. Holly, can you move us to the next slide, please? Thank you. This past year has made the importance of information sharing abundantly clear for us when we're all trying to achieve effective coordination for the individuals that we're trying to serve. With the approval by the City Council just last week of federal funding, we plan to hire a new three-person team in the Department of Safety and Inspections to provide dedicated services to those residents that are sheltering outdoors. Their work will include street outreach, development and maintenance of a by-name registry, and shelter referrals. They may also be able to provide mental and chemical health assessments out in the field. The lead position within this team will also serve as the city's point person in this workspace. Next slide, please. We have two priority goals that we're focused on at this point: collecting accurate information and our response. I'll talk first about information. This is a helpful graphic to describe the ecosystem of supports that we at the city are focused on helping folks that are sheltering outdoors get connected to. The square represents the city's team's caseload. So as of last week, that would be 28 individuals. As of this morning, 34 individuals. And we'll follow a similar approach to the Veterans Department and other outreach efforts to ask individuals to sign a form agreeing to be part of our registry so we can work with them to help navigate them into the right space within that ecosystem that fits their needs. The concept here is that many of the folks that we work with have very unique needs, and our response need to be tailored to those needs to not only place them in a safer environment, at least temporarily, but also to help ensure that they stay in housing or shelter longer, perhaps even permanently. Some people will not be willing to agree to be on the registry, and that's fine. We'll still be able to work with them on our caseload. It just may limit our ability to share information going forward. We'd like to share a few stories that illustrate how information sharing is helpful to the city team and to be able to coordinate and best serve individuals. And for that, I will hand it over to Senior Commander Ellison.
Thank you. Good morning, council members, council president. My name is Jeremy Ellison. I'm the senior commander for the Central District for the police department. So if you go back one slide, Holly, please. The top name on that list is Kay, and Kay is a woman who's been known to our team for quite a while. She's been at multiple different encampment locations throughout the last year. She's very smart. She's typically very engaging, and our team has a good relationship with her, and we like her and appreciate her very much. There have been times, though, where she's been angry and hostile towards our team, and despite our numerous efforts to connect her with resources, we have continuously been unsuccessful. She's one of the few people that are unwilling to accept resources and services. In mid-July, a report came in that a woman was in Rice Park chasing people around with a knife. She did spit on a city employee and possibly had lit a tent on fire. A short time later, the same woman was reported up at Rice and Sherburne with a sledgehammer. Our St. Paul Police Department Coast Unit responded, which included our embedded social worker. After about an hour or so, they were able to coax her into an ambulance, and she was able to be transported to the hospital. Our team connected after those incidents, and we learned that this was, in fact, Kay, who we knew. And then we collaborated amongst all of the different departments to ensure that we were pushing for her to get the support that she needed. We worked with our partners. We ensured that there was a petition for civil commitment filed. And as we understand it, what that means is that she will have a caseworker when she does get discharged from the hospital, and that she will have more resources available to her. Our understanding is that she also has several felony warrants in Hennepin County. Our city attorney's office and the police department plan to advocate for her with the goal of getting her services rather than necessarily incarceration. All of us agree that Kay needs these services to be successful in the community. And Travis, I'll turn it back over to you to continue on the list.
Thanks, Jeremy. The next example is Dee, who is a woman that we've moved from location to location, encampment locations multiple times, specifically in the Cathedral Hill area, just in the past few months. We suspect prostitution and drug use, but again, we're just focused on helping people get to stability. So that information is just there for context purposes. I'm pleased to report that after several weeks of coordinating with MnDOT, St. Paul PD, a number of outreach workers and shelter providers, including even the deputy mayor reaching out to Catholic Charities Administration to help meet the specific needs of this client, V just went into the housing program in Higher Ground last night. Last night was her first night. I'm hopeful this will turn out to be a long-term success story of this work, and perhaps even for V herself. And Ricardo will share another couple examples.
Thanks, Travis. So you'll see the arrows and dotted lines for L and B. These are two women that in our non-professional assessment have significant chemical or mental health challenges. When we've been able to get them into shelter, they have not been successful in their stay there. We understand that they've also been dangerous to other guests as well as to the staff at the shelter. It is possible that these women would agree to be on our registry, but regardless, they would be part of the caseload. So we would be, tracking their progress as well as offering services as we go forward. It is possible that these women would agree to be on there. If not, again, we're going to continue to work with them. Our challenge is that we don't know how to help them navigate from the streets into the ecosystem and into the indoors where it is safe. And so there's still learning as well as connections to services that need to be put in place. Travis?
Thanks, Director. Jay is another person that we're working with, and Jay is a trans individual who we've moved from multiple encampment locations over the past couple of months. Like L and B, our understanding is that he's not been successful in shelter in the past and is not able to go there at this time. We're not sure how and where to connect him to the supports that will be most helpful, but hopefully our team will be able to flush out those connections in the future. And then lastly, C on this list just represents residents that we interact with on a regular basis that may be camping and then are utilizing some of those services on an occasional basis, but sheltering outdoors. And from there, I will turn it back over to Senior Commander Ellison. Jeremy?
Yeah, thank you, Travis. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. Our priority goal, one of our other priority goals, the second one, is continually improving our response for people in crisis, as well as both emergency and non-emergency situations. Through the Heading Home Ramsey, we have a work group convening with the task of planning, developing, and advancing proposals for a rapid response team. The current proposal that we're working on was developed collaboratively by our service providers at Listening House, Safe Space, and Catholic Charities. The overall concept is that we hire and place full-time employees in our shelter and day space service organizations, and then they're on call or they're available for their entire shift, and they're able to respond immediately to a situation when called by our emergency responders in the police department or fire department. We're going to continue to map out the details and work through the logistics, but I want to talk about a couple of examples where we envision this type of approach could be useful. I'm not going to play the entire video here. The link is there, but I encourage you to watch it at a later time if you're able. It shows a situation where that was a multiple hour response by 6 or more emergency responders from both the police and the fire department. Our responders displayed a lot of patience and care, but if we had a team like I just talked about that was available, and we could have released multiple emergency first responders to go handle other emergency situations and not be tied up on this. And this could have been a situation where we did a warm handoff with this team. Additionally, the woman did end up getting on the bus, and the situation cleared itself from this specific situation, but unfortunately it didn't resolve her needs. MTC police did end up dealing with her later, I think that same day, ultimately required more emergency services, and obviously this is not necessarily the most efficient and effective way to deal with these issues. So we've seen police, fire, and service providers and the county involved in planning a response team proposal, and we will continue to advance this concept. We believe that there is a better way to respond to these types of incidents. Deputy Mayor Tincher.
The next couple slides, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what we're learning in terms of how we need to match supports for businesses, neighbors, in and around locations where we're providing necessary services. So I'm including a couple of emails that we received from neighbors, businesses in the West 7th area where we are providing day spaces at Freedom House through Listening House. I'm not going to read the entire email, but I will just highlight that, what we hear from our businesses and residents in and around the locations are things such as we are also very concerned about our clients being exposed to the never-ending urination, defecation near the buildings, vandalism, vagrancy, begging, fights, and screaming, litter, including condoms and syringes, and apparent drug use since the Freedom House opened. We at the city, in close collaboration with Senior Commander Ellison and his team, we've added a lot of patrols and additional resources from SPPD to have a presence there. We work really closely with Listening House and the staff there so that they are addressing situations, and we're going to continue to implement a lot of mitigation strategies. We've partnered with the Downtown Alliance to have a dedicated team that you've probably seen, the downtown ambassadors, for litter and maintenance in the public right of ways. So we'll continue those, but there are real challenges that the city will continue to figure out how to respond to. On the next slide is a similar situation. I won't read the entire email, but just talking about neighboring businesses that hear a lot of screaming or fighting and things like that are disrupting their operations. The next slide is a little bit different. I highlight this because in terms of the response team and additional resources that we want to add into this space, this is an example of a very inefficient use of Commander Molnar with our downtown beat. There was a morning very recently that he literally was responding to multiple emails and complaints from neighbors around grocery carts and graffiti. So we'd like to add a response team that would be a more efficient use of resources to address needs such as this. And then the next slide that I have is a really challenging situation where, having law enforcement in this space, luckily we avoided any number of things that could have been really bad outcomes that resulted from the exchange. I don't know how many exchanges like this are happening on a regular basis, but we have individuals in and around the area that are sharing encounters with clients and guests of Freedom House. In this one, there was an email that was sent to a large group of people claiming that there was an assault by an individual who was a guest of Listening House. There was a second email that referenced that again. In response, I checked in with the Ramsey County Sheriff and I asked, can we get the report? Our St. Paul Police Department didn't have any documentation of this incident, and we wanted to follow up on it. And as you can see from the actual report that was made, there in fact wasn't an actual assault. There was an encounter and an engagement, but luckily there was not an actual assault. And luckily, when law enforcement was called into this situation, that didn't result in use of force or a negative encounter as well. So there are real challenges and things that the city and our team is still grappling with as we try to figure out how do we provide these services and do it in a way that is responsive to everyone in our community. And there's just a lot of challenges, and I'll stop there. I know that this probably elicits a whole lot of conversation, and feedback and advice is always welcome by our team. So with that, I do want to turn it over to Kayla for the final part of ours, which is housing, which we actually believe is the ultimate solution to all of this.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Tencher. I want to spend some time talking about our housing strategy and proposed long-term investments to these challenges. As we know, as the Deputy Mayor mentioned, housing really is the solution to homelessness. So I wanted to start with an overview of our housing strategy and how it addresses some of these challenges, set some context really for the current opportunity that ARP dollars provide to make a significant long-term impact in this strategy. Go through our thinking on a proposed plan for the ARP investment, and then get your feedback and answer any questions that you might have. So I wanted to just start with really sort of a reminder and an overview of our housing strategy and the 5 objectives that we've been focused on under this strategy. These objectives are really responsive to housing needs across the whole continuum, including our unsheltered residents. Objective 1 is to meet the needs of those with the lowest incomes by increasing supply, including supply of permanent supportive housing. Objective 2 is focused on preservation. Objective 3 is focused on doing our work in innovative ways, which in this homelessness response and prevention space could include tiny houses or other innovative design. Objective 4 is to invest in ways that build wealth for residents and communities, which in this space could include the supportive services that people need to improve their situations. And objective 5 is to promote fair access to housing for all in our communities. The benefits of investing in our housing strategy in this way include, wrong slide. The opportunity that we've been working on here really is under our current housing strategy to increase the production of increased permanent supportive housing, reducing housing instability and homelessness. And while shelter expansion isn't the focus of our housing strategy, we know that an investment in permanent supportive housing will reduce the strain on our shelter capacity so that folks have somewhere to go after they obtain shelter. So this is something we've been working on under our housing strategy, as well as the short-term emergent housing needs that folks have in the current crisis with the emergency rent assistance programs. But we know that deeply affordable housing has to be a part of the long-term solution. And we have a current opportunity with ARP funds to significantly advance our goals to provide deeply affordable housing, including permanent supportive housing. ARP investment for this use could be really impactful given just the size and magnitude of the problem that we're facing and the costs that are associated with creating deeply affordable housing. Next slide, please, Holly. So an investment in this way would build off the engagement and work done around the unsheltered homelessness and expanded shelter capacity that the rest of our team just highlighted, would further community input around the importance of 30% AMI housing and solutions for unsheltered homelessness, and also would align with the federal ARP focus areas to support the homeless and those at risk of homelessness, as well as populations that have been most heavily impacted by COVID. Next slide, please.
Ms. Schuchman, and I realize that you're weaving your way through this, but I'm wondering if, and this is really just for my clarification, I always get a little bit confused about where is the city's role and where is the county's role when it comes to supportive housing, and what, if there's any way that you can just kind of mark that out. And I recognize that maybe it's just a little bit of a gray area and that's why it's confusing to me. But I think as we're talking about ARP, I know that the county has said that they're going to use their dollars primarily for the gap between, let's say, 50 down to 30. And that's great. I'm really glad that they've thrown that out there as they're, early on is what they're planning to do. But I just want to really understand what our role is, especially because the council is talking about, and of course the administration, but internally we're discussing 2022 budget. We all have housing as a big priority for us, but then also ARP opportunities, but also wanting to make sure that we're not spending our time, energy, effort, dollars in places that are actually really in some other entity's wheelhouse. So if you could just help me understand that better, I'd really appreciate it.
Sure. Council President Brenda Moen, council members. So permanent supportive housing is something that the city has invested heavily in the past. And I think what you're rightly pointing out is that our investment in permanent supportive housing has been a partnership on every occasion with Ramsey County and the funding streams that they have access to uniquely through Department of Human Services and other resources. So there's really three elements to making a permanent supportive housing project work financially. There's the capital funding to build the units. There's the operating support or rental assistance to make the building financially feasible to operate. And then there's really the funding that's required for the supportive services that we know are critical to individuals being able to maintain housing stability and success, and to be able to stay housed and ideally to move, up and out of permanent supportive housing. And so those three elements are a part of permanent supportive housing. And we expect, to engage through this effort, Ramsey County, both on the capital funding side as well as that supportive services and operating funding side. We have invited our partners at the St. Paul Public Housing Agency to be a part of our work group as well, because there are so many sort of upfront and ongoing costs that go into permanent supportive housing, and the city alone, is one of the pieces that is really critical in that puzzle.
All right. So then in this situation, we're just talking about our role in that collaborative and advancing those. And then do you, I heard Commissioner McDonough talk about deeply affordable housing with supportive services and also just deeply affordable housing. And really, he sounded like there was some interest in focusing on just the deeply affordable, recognizing that, of course, the support a piece attached to it does encourage the, as you're saying, the path up and out of the supportive housing, because obviously you're getting help and assistance moving in that direction. But I believe I heard him mention something about just that in a lot of cases, just having the availability of deeply affordable housing was the linchpin. And maybe I heard that wrong, but if you could fill me in on that a bit too.
Yeah, Council President Brenmo and council members completely agree that it's really a both and. And so our goal with the proposal that we're working on is to create a strategy and implementation plan that would fund 30% AMI housing in coordination with Ramsey County, including deeply affordable housing and including permanent supportive housing. So this is really a both and, because deeply affordable housing is homelessness prevention in many cases, and it's also homelessness can be caused by many factors, and in some cases it's caused by poverty and that alone. And so providing that deeply affordable housing might be enough for some families who've experienced short bursts of homelessness, and for others it's the deeply affordable housing with services. And so we are proposing to focus on both, and we're proposing to move forward a short-term action plan to increase permanent supportive housing, given some of the short-term shelter capacity that was set up for COVID, as well as a long-term plan for the production of deeply affordable housing, including permanent supportive housing. And Council President Brenmo, if you'd like me to finish going through my slides.
That would be great. And I do apologize for interrupting you. I see Ms. Jalali has her hand up. So if it's all right, let's see. Is this a right now question or end of the slides question, Ms. Jalali?
I can speak at the end. I would really love to support this work. And I also think we should I'm fine with letting us talk through more of it. So I'll hold. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Council Member. So next slide, please, Holly. So just a little more detail on kind of how we're thinking about moving this forward. Our plan to pursue this would really include the steps outlined here. Determine the priority homeless populations for the permanent supportive housing aspect, the housing characteristics of what the housing should look like to best serve those populations, and any geographic or other priorities we would have for deeply affordable housing without those services. We would then determine funding needs and eligible uses for the ARP dollars, as well as any other sources that might be required for operating dollars or supportive services. Along with that, estimating what scale of production we think that can be achieved with an investment here. We need to identify and secure any necessary staffing resources to advance this work. And lastly, identify and secure real estate and potentially opportunities in our current pipeline that might be able to advance our action plans. Next slide, please. So quick outline of benefits. Potential new options to better serve our extremely low income residents, including unsheltered residents, resulting in a reduction of homelessness, housing instability, as well as the myriad negative individual and community impacts that are associated. This long-term investment also has the potential to create a long-term decrease in the number of people living in encampments, to reduce the demands on our shelter system and the lack of capacity there, with more options for people to move up and out further down the continuum. And to do this work really through partnerships, building and strengthening our partnerships with others in creating the solutions here. We also have an opportunity to do this housing work in a way that increases sustainability in our community and in a way that benefits renters in terms of reduced costs for them. So last slide, I just wanted to give a little bit more sort of framing to what the scope of this project would include. Our first step is really to engage with providers and impacted residents that would be served by the permanent supportive housing, building on much of the work that has already been done, that was touched on by Alan and the Heading Home team. Creation of new permanent supportive housing opportunities for formerly homeless households, creation of affordable housing units for extremely low-income renters without services, and lastly, any just sort of potential zoning actions that would be associated with those particular projects. I'm happy to take any additional questions or comments.
All right, let's go to Ms. Jalali.
Thank you. No, I appreciate the chance to learn about this, and I have also appreciated it in context of all that we're talking about. And the thoughts I wanted to offer are just thinking back to even, a year and a half ago when we were in the throes of winter and the crisis of unhoused people. And I and many people in our community, and I know people around this table, still feel really deeply the stress and tension of those times. And, we had a really hard week with the pandemic and the new chapter we're entering. And so it's just all kind of hitting home for me that we're going to still be at this a while, and the crisis of housing that has been exposed is going to continue. But what we have now that's different is federal resource on the table, which is something that we haven't had for so long. And even back during those times and in conversations we've had around this table, I have continually thought and felt like the thing that's going to get us out of all this is if we build places for people to live. The thing that's going to get us out of all this is if we build places for people to live. And of course, every homeless person has different needs and issues. Of course, we need supportive housing. There's going to be a huge variety of living situations that are interim, and that's all part of it. And the sooner that we make enough places for people to live, the sooner this can end. And what we spend a lot of time on right now is parsing, is this the right police response or not? How much do we want law enforcement to be involved? How do we deal with and support and work with and take critical feedback from all the community and grassroots partners who work with encampments right now? What's the appropriate posture of our staff? We literally spend money right now on more staff. One of the items in this presentation was we are going to spend federal dollars on more staff to respond to encampments. And, we voted last week on more resources to support things going on downtown that do have a nexus to the unsheltered population. And so I guess I feel really excited about this fund because I think it has the potential to get us out of the paradigm we're in, get us out of the conversations we're in. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a ton of work. It's going to take a ton of community accountability. But we are often burning up our own relationships and resources on the stuckness of people being outside and how to deal with it ethically, morally, appropriately, and in a way that's true to really hard things that are going on in people's lives. And I want out of that. I just do. And so I feel excited about the promise of this. And even at those conversations, when we were talking about, oh, this is so hard. Oh, it's so bad. I can point back to the HRA conversation where we had a presentation from Director Shookman, and she said, here's all the new development in the city. Most of it is at 60% AMI. The gap is 30% AMI or 50% AMI. All of this to me is in line with everything we've talked about and all that we've said. And the missing piece has been federal funds. And now through the American Rescue Plan, we finally have millions and millions of federal funds. And I am just literally, can we build thousands of new places for people to live tomorrow? I personally feel very desperate for this to happen. And I do think every single level of government should be contributing to it because that's the resource we've won after so long. So I wanted to high level play that back as I'm sitting and thinking through all this, because to me, it feels like the potential to be game changing and We just have to make sure we're continuing to work in coordination and modeling or continuing to model. You know, we've gotten to hear from Ramsey County today. We've gotten to hear from all these other partners. I'm just very scared of how much resource we continue to spend on the short term, and we should be figuring out how to do that. I am happy that people from DSI go out versus people from SPPD. Like, those are resource allocations that I prefer personally and think are more appropriate, and we have to get out of it, and we can. And the ARP gives us a chance to. So I wanted to offer those thoughts and appreciation, and just much left thinking and feeling a lot of things here because of all that we've been through trying to support our community. That Ward 4 map with the one encampment that I looked at, it's like you look at the part of the map where the part of the city you represent is, and like, I know when that looked different with more dots. I know what those encampments look like. I remember how the tents looked. I remember who I talked to, because that's what's happening out here. And I want that to be different. So thank you. And I know I'm not alone in feeling a lot of these things. I simply want to offer that as we really think big picture about this moment we're in and what this represents. I appreciate it.
Yeah, not that I appreciate those comments, Ms. Jalali, and also recognizing that we're at 10% of the number we were peaked out at. It's an incredible success, and that is due to opening up apparently more spaces. So I mean, that's huge. I mean, I think that kind of a dramatic of a shift is unheard of, and people are getting cared for on an individual basis. And so we're walking into this fall in a much different place than we were walking into last fall, which is a huge deal. I see Mr. Tolbert had a hand up, and then Ms. Prince.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Just a couple questions on the 30% AMI focus. I know that this council supports enthusiastically investing in 30% AMI throughout the city. Just question to Ms. Schuckman, and not to put Commissioner McDonough on the spot, but if he's still on, he can probably jump in. And what are the thoughts about the 30% AMI across the county? I know many of those suburban cities have, I think what happened up at Luther Seminary is a prime example of the fight against, in the suburban communities, the deeply affordable housing. What's the county's plan to ensure that we can create economic diversity across not just the city of St. Paul, but across the county? As we know, for both resources and in schools and everything, that economic diversity really makes a huge difference in people's lives. So maybe to Kayla, what is your conversation with the county and the cities around, and maybe Commissioner McDonough, how do you, I know you're a St. Paul guy, so I'm not, it's not, you represent people who support this, but what is the county talking about in terms of across the county?
Council President Brenmoen, Councilmember Tolbert, I can just share that we have been very deeply engaged with county staff on this proposal. They have been a part of developing sort of the goal statement, the project scope, the timeline, the outline of what we'd like to accomplish. And I know that they're very focused on investing in housing needs across their county. And so I think from my perspective, the Ramsey County staff team has been very engaged, and I expect that they are planning to move forward sort of a complementary proposal that would allow us to really, engage in this work.
Council President Brenmo, and I could jump in real quick if you'd like. And thanks for that question, Chris. I'll tell you, it's a big deal, right? I mean, it's easy to talk, right? And we get commissioners that are fully on board with this. We just had this conversation yesterday. Well, and I'll point out, I mean, we put a half a billion dollar project on hold because the community will only accept 10% of that housing at 80% AMI for seniors. And we will not move forward on that project until we can get that city to do better and accept more, right? That's a value of ours. This HRA levy that we're going to be imposing, and thank you for your support on that. And, you know, we've committed that, 50% of those funds are going to come into St. Paul. But more importantly, that 50% that we spend in the suburbs, because we can't just keep concentrating all this either, right? It has to be spread out. Everybody has to share in the solution of this issue. And all communities need to be welcoming. And we've got a lot of communities, even in Ramsey County suburban communities, first string suburbs that, you know, do the talk, but they don't walk it very well when it comes down to saying, okay, we're ready for a 30% AMI housing development. By the time you're done, they've moved it to 80% for seniors. We heard about a project yesterday where a community was celebrating 60%, but it's all seniors, right? That safer. We need senior affordable housing. Don't get me wrong, but we can't have St. Paul take on the big load of that 15,000 in that gap either. We need the suburban communities to step up. So, Chris, to your point, there's a voice, many voices that are pushing us at the county level to ensure that these investments are shared throughout the county. And our goal is to use as much of our ARP money, our HRA money that we're going to be levying, totally focused in on the 30% AMI. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, and I think how you describe that is exactly what I've seen happen is in Roseville and other communities, they'll say we're investing in affordable housing and it'll be 60% AMI for seniors, which quite frankly, 60% in a lot of neighborhoods is market rate, naturally occurring market rate. But I hope the county uses some of their leverage to ensure that happens across the county and not just in the city of St. Paul, because it makes a huge difference for every community and for schools and everything to have that economic diversity. And, you know, this council is very supportive of that, but we also want to ensure that as we know, a lot of people struggling from homelessness, and Jamie probably knows the numbers because I know you know near everyone individually, but where they last lived. And we know that St. Paul is a place where people come, and we're welcoming of that because there are resources here. But it's not like everybody was living in St. Paul before they were homeless or when they were growing up or whatnot. So thank you.
And I think that the complementary piece of that as well is I'd be interested in adding senior housing in St. Paul. You know, affordable senior housing, because I feel like it's moved out to the suburbs. And so a little bit of more of that in here and a little bit more just generally affordable housing in the suburbs would be a welcome addition. Because, gosh, I've heard people say, there's nowhere for me to, I want to sell my home and let it be a starter home for a new family or, someone just starting out and they can't find a place to live in the city. You know, and so that would also open up some affordable housing for first-time home buyers. So I appreciate that we're thinking about it that way as well. And of course, it continues to be an and this and this and this. Just keep piling it on, Kayla. Just open up your arms and catch it all. But I underscoring that and then looking at the converse as well. Ms. Prince.
Thank you, Council President Brenmone, and thanks to everyone on this at today's meeting who has presented. This has been incredibly informative, and I think for the public to understand the ways in which we have expanded and coordinated our efforts to deal with this, with homelessness and with affordable housing is just critically important. So first, thank you. I have a few questions. First, I just want to make the comment that I think one way for us to talk about 30% AMI housing is that, when I was growing up, people who now are in that income bracket were people, let's say, teachers' aide, daycare workers, nursing assistants. I mean, they were people who could afford housing when I was growing up. And I think it's really important for us to explain to communities that the reason we need 30% housing isn't because of the failure of people who need it. It's the failure of wages to keep pace with the work that people are doing, so that working people, and during COVID, we discovered that they are working people. They are so aptly called now essential workers are the people who need 30% area median income housing. So I think we need to do a better job of talking about who those needs are. And those are people who should be your neighbors, who wait on you every day and should be able to live in your community. So my question is, with one of the things that was so great about our dealing with the encampments last year and our partnership with the county was being able to increase the shelters to include Bethesda and Luther and the nuns residence at St. Kate's. And my question is, what is our lease agreement on those things? How long do we have them? And in terms of renewing those leases to continue to be able to provide that high quality shelter, do we have a plan?
Council President, Council Member Prince, I think if Keith Lattimore is still available, I don't want to put him on the spot, but he would be who I would look to on those details. Or anyone from the county.
Yep.
Great.
I don't know. Keith, are you, if Keith.
Yeah, actually, I just stepped away, so pardon me, I missed a question there, Jamie.
Keith, Jane Prince here. I can reiterate because, and it's great that you're the person answering this. Keith and I toured the nuns residence at St. Kate's on Monday and saw that Project Home is able to operate so much more robustly and in a way that so appropriately serves families in terms of providing stability, providing meals, providing just an incredible facility to meet those needs. And I know that Project Home, as much as they are still thinking about the ability to restore the volunteer effort through the churches, they are really clear that that the shelter option in the nuns residence is just so far superior to what they've been able to offer through volunteers. So Keith, my question was one that we were asked the other day, and I don't expect you to have a definitive answer, but for the shelters we've been able to add, like the nuns residence, like the Luther Seminary, Mary Hall, and Bethesda, how long is our lease agreement, and what is our plan for coming up with additional dollars to be able to extend those leases?
Thank you, Councilmember Prince. The first part of your question is how long the leases are. We have the leases out until May of next year. Those are the leases for, we extended the lease for Luther Seminary out till then. Various contracts have different leases, so I don't have all of them here to say, about where others may fall. As far as what happens thereafter, that is where we're doing work now to try to get all that together. As most of us know on the call, these projects cost money. They're expensive projects, and so we have to, come to find out kind of how that, what happens thereafter. And that's where, obviously Kayla, as well as, the work that she's doing and partnering up with our CED department here in Ramsey County is really kind of finding that's kind of their area to talk about the supply and the demand side of it. And this is where we look at to see what space will be available once that happens. So that work is underway. I don't have an answer for you now, but there are still decisions being made about ARP dollars as well as, pathways forward. And, I know there's a HRA levy and some of those things that are happening. So that work is still kind of being figured out. But as of right now, that work is underway and we don't have definitive answers about how and when the other dollars are able to support ongoing efforts.
Great. Thank you, Keith.
Council President can I jump in real quick, please, Jim McDonough? Jane, you need to hear this though, but this board, you heard the weariness from one of your colleagues, right? We do not want to keep operating in this part of the system. The sense of urgency to build out the system so we're not continuing to operate in this part of the system or grow this part of the system or make this piece go longer. So this board's committed to April, but this community needs to know we do not, our weariness here is matched by the community. We have no desire to extend these leases and continue to operate this way and sustain emergency shelter as our solution to the homeless problem in this community. Housing individuals is the solution. We need to focus in on that. And so we're going to have that conversation at the board. It started yesterday, actually, and the pushback from my colleagues about even thinking about that this is going to be sustainable. And someone mentioned it earlier, they asked. I mean, Catholic Charities, Union Gospel, we got other partners here that have a role here in kind of, bringing their services back to pre-COVID level services to help with that transition too. But I just want to make it clear that don't assume the county is going to continue to fund these ongoing. Our hope is to use our era money to actually invest in 30% AMI housing.
Thanks, Jim. That's helpful. I know that at the nuns' residence the other day, they do have some capacity. So I imagine that's reducing the family waiting list. But in terms of Project Home, that has been a many-year project. So I hear you on, I believe all of our goal is permanent housing. And if it's permanent supportive or permanent 30% AMI, I think we all share that. I just have been really gratified that the shelter options that we have been able to offer in the last year have been dignified, and people have really been able to get the services, get linked to the services that they need. And I just would hate to see us discontinue that if the need continues. Also, you don't have to answer this, but it does seem like Bethesda as a facility, it may be overbuilt for long-term or permanent single-room occupancy housing, but I'm thinking that, some of these facilities may fit an SRO style housing that could be permanent in nature. And the city has a history of developing that. Back in the 80s and 90s. We did develop SRO housing to provide options for very low income people who were facing homelessness. My one last question is on the area action plans. That seems to fall within the city's purview. And I just need to understand, because the city doesn't have anything to do with mental health services and human services. I'm just wondering how the county is involved with those really tough individual cases that we're facing with the area action plans, and if we in fact do have a county partner in that work.
Council President, Councilmember Prince, yes, for the area action plan work, we do biweekly convening meeting. And so in addition to the county and all the city partners, the Downtown Alliance, Met Transit, we convene and we do a review of, what's happening in these areas. And it's not just related to, crime or mental health supports or persons in crisis. It also is how are we coordinating around facilities maintenance and doing things like that. So it's very operational, tactical around, how, are we coordinating so that those geographic spaces are as welcoming and inviting and safe as we can come together and make them.
Great. Thanks so much, Deputy Mayor. I am, again, I'm gratified with all that is being done and on a case-by-case basis where you know the names, that you know the personal stories, the level of compassion and support that is provided is inspiring to me. I'm also relieved, I guess is the word, to have you sharing some of those really tough stories from the West End business community, because I think all of us on the council are now being copied on those emails that are coming to you about the problems that they're facing. And I think our willingness, our staff's willingness to put those in front of the council and to talk about them, the most difficult cases, demonstrates your real commitment to this issue and to solving it. So I want to also thank you for that and reassure people who are contacting me, as I have been doing, that this is a problem that the city team is intent on resolving and that they're being heard. So thank you for sharing that tough business today. And that's it for my questions.
That's good, because we are out of time. Thank you for your questions and comments, especially appreciated elevating the conversation about the spaces that we have been using through COVID and the opportunities for different uses for those spaces or continued use until we have a plan. I know that I toured Bethesda and I just was like, gosh, this is like turnkey for a lot of things that we do in the city, and I'd hate to see us too eager to get rid of it and not explore options. So I appreciate your bringing that up. I know we've discussed. We have, I just want to extend a gratitude for the inclusion of Councilmember Naker in this work. As I was mentioning earlier, we get monthly updates from her about what is happening. And then, of course, I appreciate Deputy Mayor and Director Cervantes, your ongoing efforts to keep the council up to date. And as Ms. Prince said, we certainly hear bits and pieces through emails, and I think getting a full picture of what's going on, recognizing the challenges, realities, and efforts being made is really important. So thank you for that. And then, as I mentioned earlier with the county, we'll continue to have this as an ongoing conversation, especially as we're heading into the fall and especially as we're heading into our budget season, so we know where our budget funds will need to be allocated, where our ARP dollars can be best invested, and just know how we can help and support the work that's happening. And again, recognizing we've had huge successes, and taking this opportunity to report them has been very, very heartening and hopeful. I think hopefully that message is coming through to you. So thank you. And we, as I mentioned, are out of time. So we're going to call things off here today and adjourn until we meet again. So thank you very much.